I think they beat it into you. You just learn to pretend it didn't happen to you.
Harbor Springs, without a doubt, one of the crown jewels of northern Michigan, and in the heart of this quiet Emmett County community sits Holy Childhood Catholic Church. This was the site of the Holy Childhood Native American boarding school. This archway is all that's left of the school. The boarding school opened in the 1800s as part of a nationwide effort by the U.S. government to wipe out Native American culture and address a so-called Indian problem. The schools forced students to learn English, and they were forbidden from speaking their native language or practicing many of their traditions. Kim Fike and Linda Kobe both attended Holy Childhood and say that was the case in Harbor Springs.
They cut everyone's hair short, boys and girls, and they assigned us our clothes, and you only had so many outfits to wear. We were expected to look a certain way, talk a certain way. You don't dare challenge the authority there, the nuns.
Both say the nuns were abusive towards Native American students, physically, emotionally, and sometimes sexually.
And it seemed like you couldn't do anything, say anything. I remember getting slapped in the face for smiling at my cousin across the table. The worst part at the beginning was hearing all the other girls crying at night. You tried to cry silently because they didn't need much of an excuse to beat you for making too much noise.
Halloween was the worst. There was a time they dropped us all off in the cemetery. All us little girls put us in the back of a truck and dropped us off in the night and made us find our way back. Another Halloween, I found a bone in my bed with my name written on it. You would hear more of, "Shh, sister's coming." Nobody would, you could hear their clicking on the hardwood floor or their clearing of their throat, and we just didn't want to get beaten, so nobody said anything.
In many cases, parents had no choice but to send their children to these schools. If they didn't, they risked losing government rations and supplies.
Our parents somehow just cooperated. I think they were powerless to do anything. We just knew that when the van showed up to pick up the kids, well, we'd run out in the woods and try and hide for a while, but that didn't really work. They'd wait until we came out.
And students were allowed few, if any, personal possessions.
I just grabbed a couple of my things and put it in a paper bag, and when we got there, they took them, and I don't know what they did with them, burned them or what. They didn't want you to have anything that reminded you of home.
Kim left the school in 1974, Linda in 1965, but the school would remain open until the 1980s before being torn down in the 2000s. But the memory of what happened there for generations has hardly faded.
The archway doesn't bother me, the bell of the church does. Hearing that church bell just, I don't even know how to explain what it did to me. Made my heart jump a few times, I know that.
Anytime I hear the word Harbor Springs, it just takes me right back to the boarding school of Holy Childhood and what went on there. The torturous day after day, thinking you're never going to get out of there, and the loneliness of missing your family, and the effect that it had on us.
So it is known in our community that our relatives are buried here.
The Holy Childhood Native American boarding school was open in Harbor Springs from the 1800s to the mid-1980s. Generations of Native American children attended the school. Meredith Kennedy was among the last of the students to walk the halls, but her connection with the school became even more personal in 2011. When human remains were unearthed during road work around Holy Childhood.
We'd been given 2 days to go and collect our ancestors. We didn't get all of them, and they're still under the road because whoever we couldn't get got paved back over. When we were working in 2011, you could clearly tell. You cannot mistake an adult femur for a child femur.
The discovery only further confirmed long-held beliefs that children died at Holy Childhood. Dawn Sinaway Crampton also worked to collect what remains they could.
It made my gut hurt, and it made my heart hurt, because it's like, what did this child do to deserve to walk on? Or what did somebody do to this child? And that's the saddest thing, because we will never know the potential. We will never know what these children could have been.
It's a situation not unique to Harbor Springs and likely to repeat itself at sites of former boarding schools across the U.S. Canada faced its own reckoning with the discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves at boarding schools earlier this year, and that prompted this Facebook video from Kennedy.
We do not have an official protocol for how to reinterr our ancestors because they were never supposed to be there to begin with.
That spurred a group of survivors of Holy Childhood who now meet monthly to not only heal, but also discuss how to share the story of what happened here and at other Native American boarding schools.
We need to get this out. We need to let America also have that shame. And we need to no longer be the Indian problem, because that is how U.S. policy has always treated us, as the Indian problem. So we needed to be the Indian solution.
Washington, D.C. is also taking action. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, the first Native American to hold a cabinet position, has ordered a review of U.S. Native American boarding school policies. She's tasked former Bay Mills Tribal President Brian Newland with compiling this report. Newland currently serves as Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs at the Interior Department. The report is expected to detail historic records along with possible burial sites.
We're all putting our hopes in that her initiative will bring the truth out and start the healing and justice and reconciliation. The biggest thing of it is the impact that boarding school did to the intergenerational trauma, the unresolved grief, and then we carry that burden and pass it down to our kids.
For all of my ancestors under this road and my relatives, they deserve a proper burial. My families within my community deserve healing. My families deserve to be able to say for the next 7 generations, we are going to heal. And we will be a people that we know we are and that we have always been.
For years, Native American boarding schools witnessed unspeakable horrors, a dark history that for decades stayed silent, but now begs not to be forgotten, with a new chapter in the history of these schools opening. And for the survivors, their story, in many ways, is just beginning.
We need everyone in the community to at least recognize that this has happened, and awareness that this has happened. We're not looking for people to feel guilty. We're just looking for them to say, wow.
It's very sad because we always thought it was just us. And here it is, happening all over the world. And for so long. But I say the time is now that everybody's talking all over the world.
It's like a freedom to be who you were meant to be. And for our communities to heal, there's so much that needs to be done in the healing process.